Good evening, and thank you for joining this online discussion. It's on-the-record discussion, which will be distributed via Border Zone Media Project in English and Russian languages. And today we discuss very timely the upcoming NATO summit Biden-Putin, which will take place next week, both of them, and possible implication for Black Sea region. First, of course, we're talking about Ukraine and Georgia. I'm in Georgia, and one of our distinguished speakers today, Deputy Foreign Minister Mr. Vasil Bodnar, is in Ukraine. And our speakers is Member of European Parliament, former Prime Minister of Lithuania, Mr. Andrius Kubilüs. Good evening. Ambassador John Hurst, who is a director of Atlantic Council's Eurasia program. As I said, Deputy Foreign Minister of Ukraine, Vasil Bodnar, and Ambassador of Turkey to Georgia, Jeren Язган. I think she will join soon. And we will start from opening remarks section. And if I may, I will ask Mr. Vasil Bodnar to start, because at the moment we see uprising threats to Ukrainian security. We see increased amount of Russian troops near Ukrainian borders. As for Georgia, we are also not in a very best position, because since Second Karabakh War, Russian soldiers are now in all three countries, in Georgia illegally, in Azerbaijan and Armenia. So situation is like tense a bit as well, but of course in Ukraine it's hot war, so it's much more vivid. And unfortunately, both Ukraine and Georgia are not presented during the NATO summit. So please, Deputy Foreign Minister of Ukraine, Mr. Vasil Bodnar, could you please start your opening remarks?
Thank you so much, dear Ambassador, distinguished participants, the Prime Minister. So it is really a pleasure for me to be here today. I just have an opportunity to meet a couple of Lithuanian friends, and even have a possibility to see a president of Lithuania here traveling to Georgia. So it's a linkage between us continue to be. So thank you for inviting me to participate in this event. For us, really, the NATO summit and the NATO MEP and then membership is a hugely important issue, and I would like to deliver a couple of key remarks for us. So, first of all, we are in very dangerous situation with regard to the military security position, because you have been witnessing the concentrations of military forces of Russia on our borders in the occupied territories of Ukraine, and still they continue to threaten us. Or in the nearest months, we will see the increased activities in Belarus and in other regions, which will mean this exercise is up at 2021, which will increase the possibility of military attack of Russia from north and south at the same time. So it opened many questions how to defend ourselves, and for us, the very relevant answer for this situation will be the NATO membership. So actually, as well as for Georgia, and you pretty well know that Ukraine is expecting for the decisions to be implemented from 2008 together with Georgia. But so from one side, we definitely welcome the allies' intentions to discuss the documents on NATO open door policy during the summit, and we are expecting it. At the same time, we do expect that the final NATO summit communique will also reflect the reference to Budapest Summit 2008, that finally Ukraine could become a member of the alliance, and as well as we are also waiting for the strong messages of Ukraine's practical and military support by the alliance against this backdrop of the Russian aggression. So for us, and then maybe for Georgia as well, the membership is a win-win situation, both for allies and for Ukraine. And MEP remains relevant for Ukraine. The authorities, constitution, population is supportive for that. And it is also a stronger incentive for continuing reforms and like a pushing mechanism. From the other side, it's the best response for these aggressive attempts of Russia, because if we will look today at the map, Baltic states, which are having the NATO shield, they are not threatening military by Russians, despite any different threats appeared. But from the other point of view, Ukraine will be Ukraine and Georgia, I would say, will be continued to be under the military threat up until NATO shield will appear in this territory. So that is the thing which should be understandable. That otherwise we will be forced to think about some other means of defense of ourselves, and there are a number of discussions in different manners. So I would not be speculating on that, but that's the key point. From the other side, we have last year we have been granting the EOP. EOP is also an important mechanism, but it could not be a precaution to get MAP. EOP is primarily as an opportunity for deepening military to military cooperation, while MAP is a comprehensive membership preparation plan. And these two formats can be implemented simultaneously. They are not, they are complementary, they are fully complementary. Actually, we realize that more should be done in order to reach the ultimate goal of NATO membership. In this regard, we also believe that the granting of MAP to Ukraine should become the next logical step in Ukraine's relations with NATO. And we always should keep in mind that Ukraine's non-allied status did not prevent Russia's opening external aggression against our state. So it is also discussions how to strengthen our security, and that was also some politicians in Ukraine start to think about that, but it's a different story. So the caution of policy of some NATO members regarding Ukraine's further Atlantic progress under the pretext that not provoking Russia, it's a wrong signal, because it only provoke and give additional opportunities for Kremlin to be more active in pressing on both Ukraine, Georgia, and West as well, and try to misuse this dialogue as the methods of influencing on the positions of Western states or Western powers with regard to the security situation in the region. The other issue is about the strengthening our collective measures of defense or collective efforts to strengthen security within the Black Sea region. It is also one of the ways to strengthen the resilience inside our both societies and military strength. And one of the idea, which we already try to work on that, is to create some kind of common forces which will be responding the challenges which exist in the region. But it's also the issue for discussions, and maybe we will further on talk about that in the first discussions. As well, we should take into consideration all the efforts that Russia pays to interfere into internal affairs in NATO countries and try to make these propaganda campaigns, fake news campaigns, etc., to create a negative image of Ukraine, Georgia, and other countries, and to promote so-called their peaceful attitude. It is also one of the fake attempts which mislead the communities in Western countries and do not show the real pictures it exists. So maybe I will stop on that, and because I couldn't be stoppable to saying about our security, but maybe then we will discuss and engage in discussions of the different issues. Thank you.
Thank you for talking about Georgia together with Ukraine all the time. It's very important from my point of view. Ambassador Herbst, could you please start your opening remarks from evaluating which strategy, from your point of view, United States new administration has towards Russia or our countries like Ukraine and Georgia? Is it new? Is there any strategy? What's going on, please?
I think that there's a very clear policy preference on the part of President Biden and his administration. And by and large, this policy stance is a positive one. It starts with the notion that the United States is stronger, working closely with its allies. And this is partly a rebuke to President Trump, who did not appreciate how important NATO was to American security and how important good relations with the EU are to American prosperity. And one of Moscow's signature policy tactics is to try to divide the United States from its European friends and allies. And Biden wants to make sure that cannot work. So that's the start of Biden's policy towards Russia and Russia's neighbors. Then regarding Russia itself, Biden understands that Putin is pursuing revisionist policies designed to upend the international security order that emerged not just at the end of the Cold War, but even World War II. Putin is directly assaulting the concept of territorial integrity in Georgia, in Ukraine, not to mention Moldova, and more recently Armenia and Azerbaijan, well, Armenia. So that's a problem. That's a big problem. And President Biden understands that it is very much in American national interest to make sure that Moscow fails in the effort to upend that security order, in part by providing staunch support to Ukraine and to Georgia, certainly more steady support than they received from President Trump, whose policy towards Moscow was quite unusual, peculiar even. Now, there is one aspect of the Biden stance which I don't think is so positive. He's right that we want to have excellent relations with NATO, with our NATO allies, with our Eastern European friends, our European Union friends. But there seems to be a tendency, we've already witnessed it in a very sorry way, to let our European allies and friends have their way on issues of great importance to us. Biden made a huge mistake in waiving the sanctions on Nord Stream 2, permitting that project to proceed. He did that as a gesture to Merkel. He did not need to make that gesture to Merkel. He was already making nice to her after Trump's cavalier handling of the relationship with Germany. But not only was that a gift to Merkel, it was a gift to the Kremlin. It was a geopolitical mistake of the first order. And even the way that Biden presented, or the Biden team presented it on the same day that Blinken and Lavrov met, was a huge tactical error. So there are things that the Biden administration could do better, and we will certainly encourage them to do better. But let me just make one more point here. While Biden made a terrible mistake on Nord Stream 2, it's not the end of the game in Washington. Congress is deeply upset about the decision. Blinken was severely criticized when he testified in Congress this week. He made some statements about sanctioning the certification process. Let's see if he does a better job at keeping his word on that than he did with his words on Nord Stream 2 when he testified to become a Secretary of State.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
I would like to ask Mr. Andrus Kubilюs to comment on what approach European Union has towards Russia, and how do you see this not inviting Georgia and Ukraine to upcoming NATO summit? Is it a good idea?
Well, when you're asking what the EU is, what kind of EU approach towards Russia is at the time being available, I would say, whom do you mean as European Union? If you will ask Lithuanian approach, that would be very simple. And we are working on and I'm leading the team, to prepare a special report to the Parliament on EU strategy towards Russia, long-term strategy. I see quite a large unanimity among different political groups on quite critical, evaluation of policies till now and what is needed to be done. But that will come a little bit later. And of course, during this week, we adopted, again, the resolution on developments in Russia, on all those foreign agents, and undesirable organizations and closure of different NGOs, and so on. And this is the 5th resolution on Russian developments during the last year, since last September. And we can and we see very clearly, the situation in Russia is really developing in a very bad way from a human rights position. Unfortunately, we're feeling ourselves in some way politically impotent, that we cannot stop that, and even what is more worrying, that we are becoming accustomed to such kind of development, and new events, new aggressive, steps made by Kremlin authorities towards Navalny, towards Russian people. We are not. It does not make us, any more so emotional and sensitive as it was before. That's what we were talking about. Now on NATO and NATO summit, I think that we need to be very clear on what was going on. I am not so familiar with NATO, decision making, but I saw a lot of, Georgian media and Ukrainian media. Ukrainian media was envying to Georgia. It looked like that Georgia really will receive membership action plan. It was just, 2 or 3 months ago. It was full articles in different media. And I think that again, Kremlin made clear steps, with how to kill any kind of possibility for NATO membership action plan during this summit, with all that military provocation of military buildup on Ukrainian borders. So I think that was at least my evaluation. It was targeted, first of all, not to, of course, that was threatening Ukraine and everybody. We were again, we passed a resolution. We were, worried that it can happen some kind of really, bad things. But first of all, Kremlin targeted, NATO, forthcoming NATO summit. Again, to show that if you will, offer any kind of membership action plan, so we are ready, to do some really very aggressive steps forward. And Kremlin achieved what they expected. At least, for time being, I do not see that NATO, insists on any kind of, steps forward. And that means that really still in the West, there is this kind of mentality, let's not provoke Kremlin. Let's not provoke Kremlin. When we're talking about Eastern Partnership countries, about Georgia or NATO or Ukraine, not only about NATO membership, but even about integration towards EU, still this logic, let's not provoke Kremlin, is somewhere not openly declared, but somewhere is existing. And I see that as really big challenge for all of us, because from my point of view, I don't know, I am not a military expert, but from my point of view, Georgia and Ukraine, maybe Georgia even more, are ready really for NATO membership. If to look only into some kind of standards, defense structures, whatever, of course, maybe there is some still deficit of improvement, but I think that NATO in its own, history was, accepting some members which were, even below those achievements which Georgia or Ukraine has. So it's not about, as I say, it's not about is Georgia or Ukraine ready. It's much more about how the West understands Kremlin policy, and what the West is going to do with its policy towards Russia. That's the biggest question, because if that will stay in such a way as it is now, so Kremlin really also learned very good lesson. If when the next NATO summit will come, it will be enough for Kremlin, again, to show that they are building up, military forces somewhere close to Ukraine, or I don't know, to Georgia or somewhere else, just to get the same reaction as they got, this time from the West. So what is needed, and that is not that is for us and for all the friends of Ukraine and Georgia, not just not just for Georgians and Ukrainians themselves. I see really that we need to have some kind of common approach, common efforts to work first of all in the Western capitals, trying to change their approach towards Russia. I'm trying to do it when I'm talking about Eastern Partnership, and in the report which we are preparing now on EU policy towards Russia, we put very simple language at the end. There are different chapters, but one of the chapters is how helpful would be, a much stronger and much more ambitious EU policy towards Eastern Partnership countries like Georgia, Ukraine, or Moldova, offering them much more clear, path of integration towards EU, towards full membership, because that is how success of Ukraine, of Georgia, and Moldova can be created, and that would be very helpful to Russia, not to Kremlin, but to Russian people, because that would inspire them, really to follow the same example. I don't know if that could be, very much convincing argument to start to speak that also, Georgian and Ukrainian membership in NATO would be helpful to Russia itself, because that is the way how the West can help Russia or Russian authorities or Russian nation to abandon the policy of aggressive behavior, both externally and at the end internally. So that's what Russia is suffering most, because of its own external aggressive policy, and that is where the only way how the West can help Russia is really to show that Russia will pay a big price if it will keep going with that aggressive policy, and to show very clearly that the West is ready to face that aggressiveness and is not afraid of Moscow aggressiveness. And at least knowing a little bit Russian character, Ukrainians of course and Georgians knows maybe even better than we know. But knowing a little bit of that Russian character, I see very clearly when they will see the force answering to their provocative aggressive behavior, then they will stop very quickly now. Then they will stop very quickly with all the aggressive policies towards the neighborhood. If really what Vice Minister was saying, if the West will continue showing that we don't want to provoke Russia, and we are afraid that Russia or Kremlin will move with its aggressive policy again towards Ukraine or towards Georgia, that really will provoke Kremlin to be even more aggressive. So for us, it would be very important really to understand what NATO and EU policy would help not only Ukraine and Georgia, but what policy would help Russia, and that is the message which we need to deliver to the Western capitals, because all the time when we are talking about NATO membership of Ukraine and Georgia, then we can hear, or sometimes it's a silent message, in between of lines, that this will provoke Russia, and we don't want to provoke Russia. I would say that also, what Vasil Bodnar was speaking, I'm not a big expert on that, but I would say I don't know how to change that language, but when and you are absolutely right, when you are talking that Kremlin policy is really creating danger for you, and NATO membership would diminish that danger, that is absolutely right language, right message. But if you are bringing that message directly to big capitals, we understand that message very clearly. But if you bring that message to Berlin or to Paris, I don't know about Washington, they will say, look, guys, we don't want to go immediately to the war. If really Russia is so dangerous, Kremlin is so dangerous that they will again start military attacks, and you just want NATO membership in order to feel yourself more defensible, then in some capitals really you will get some skeptical response. I'm not trying to convince you. Don't speak about Moscow danger and Russian danger, but maybe we can try to find the common language, common messaging, how we can change that. That language, how to convince the West that really it would be much better, not only for Ukraine and for Georgia, but also for Russia itself at the end, and of course for the whole West, if they would behave in a more ambitious and more how to say, more direct way, looking into the whole region, what NATO and EU can do.
Thanks a lot. And now I'd like to ask Ambassador Fatьма Джерен Язган, thank you for joining. And actually, your opening remarks, if possible. We're hearing about NATO membership for Georgia, for Ukraine since 2008 minimum. At the moment, we see that unfortunately, Georgia and Ukraine are not very actively moving to the summits next week. My question will be, this weekend, a week ago, it's very actively discussed that Turkey in Georgia, in South Caucasus, is, let's say, balancing Kremlin's influence, both in regard with Karabakh conflicts and maybe in Georgia as well, I don't know. Would you say that Turkey is balancing Kremlin's influence in the Black Sea region of South Caucasus, please?
Well, good evening, and I don't know if it is audible, if the voice is all right. Good. So I had a technical issue in the beginning. Well, first, hello to my good friend Vasil from Kiev, from Ankara. We had good work. And the short answer to your question, it's our function is not about balancing anyone. We are not a counterweight. Turkey is a neighbor, is a NATO member in the region, is a strategic partner for both countries. And I think Turkey, unlike certain countries, does not follow a policy line according to domestic political needs or daily, hourly needs. We have a strategy for the Black Sea, and we have a strategy for the Caucasus. We have our relations with both Ukraine and Georgia since their independence for a long time on the same lines. That is territorial integrity, very principled, territorial integrity, sovereignty, and right to choose. And sovereignty is actually about the right to choose of their defense and security needs and alliances. But also we are very, very aware of a need for collective stability. If it's a zero-sum game, this region will never be stabilized and will never have the security it needs. I see a bigger challenge, to be frank, having both served in Kiev in early 2000s and now here, and in Moscow in between. I see a bigger challenge. The bigger challenge is all these regional issues and politics are very much influenced by what's going on the global scale. And the United Nations Security Council, there are permanent members who are always in interaction between each other. And now, since it looks like we have moved into a transactional format of international relations, that ambiguity embedded in that format has an impact on the region. So we had this conversation before with you, Igor, in somewhat more discrete format, but it's not about only one country. And but there are real security needs and the threats, the security challenges both Ukraine and Georgia have, and we need to address them. We believe as long as the people and the governments, the state of the both countries are determined to join NATO and that they see NATO membership as a way for security, their own security, Turkey, as the Black Sea country with the longest shoreline, and also the NATO country, as a matter of fact, the oldest NATO country in that whole region in terms of its years. I would say that Turkey will continue to back that line, giving a map, giving a membership. Our position is very clear on the NATO. Now, what needs to be done to get that consensus from NATO? That could be discussed in long hours. But as a matter of fact, the aim here is about security. It's providing deterrence and security for both countries, but also the regional stability. So escalations, which would need more costly solutions, is also something that we wouldn't want to see as a regional country. You see, whatever price that Georgia or Ukraine pays or could pay, the same price we pay. We are here. This is not a philosophical, theoretical discussion for us. This is a very real issue. And indeed, we did develop our relations with both countries. With Ukraine, obviously, our stance is very clear. Our relations have been visible now. It was not visible to maybe public opinion before, but now it is. The defense relations, the economic relations, political relations in every field. And I don't need to get into the details of the relations with Ukraine here, because I have this very good friend, very competent ambassador in Kiev. If need be, he would be here to explain. But with Georgia, I could say the last week's visit of Prime Minister Garibashvili to Ankara was indeed a result, and it's a show of the support that Georgia has from Turkey, and that will continue. This region, the Caucasus, is not an island. It is connected to all, I would say, the Baltics, Black Sea, and Caspian, and through that, even to Afghanistan. This is no region in this theater is alone. And now it is, I must say, somewhat connected with the recent developments in this year. We could see definitely the Eastern Mediterranean and even North Africa. So whatever we're talking about here in NATO and both countries here, we also have to look at that global context of what is going on between major players. Definitely Caucasus is very important. The stability is very important. NATO membership of Georgia, which we support, as well as Ukraine, is important. But it is within a context. We have seen this year 44 days war. And Azerbaijan and Armenia now still are negotiating a solution to get maybe the delineation or demarcation of borders and all that. And we're not at that table, but it's still continuing. So, for instance, without that conversation, without that situation, obviously, we cannot talk about permanent peace and stability in the region. And these are all connected issues, to be frank. And as an ambassador, active ambassador, there are things that I can say and not say in such a format of discussion. But I am sure the capitals which the distinguished Prime Minister have mentioned are not only talking about and are not only considering Georgia and Ukraine when they're discussing in New York. So the reality, we have to, if we speak the reality as much as we can, candidly, there are tables which are not only in Brussels. There are tables which are out of the NATO format. There is an EU format. There is a United Nations Security Council format. So all these pertinent, but Turkey has its role here, As a NATO member, we're both contributing within the NATO and bilateral. We try to create platforms, formats, trilateral, quadrilateral, so that we could enhance the security and confidence building. It's not about provoking or not provoking, but it's about trying to get out and away from that transactional understanding of security. Because when we go on that road, it means we're not talking about values, particularly if not coherently applied. That values rhetoric is very dangerous because it erodes the sense of the values, the whole package of the values which we as NATO countries expect from both countries, for instance. And also we need to be consistent. We cannot apply set of principles and values in one conflict and not do that in another one. If you do that, then you're playing into the hands of the actors who play that game, the very pragmatic realpolitik game. And then I think we know who we're talking about. So with these opening remarks, maybe I could say that Turkey as a NATO member and as a country in the region who has excellent relations with both Georgia and Ukraine will continue to advocate for the membership and on that road, whatever steps that should be taken. Enhancement of capacity, military and governance, which is also very important. I must say that our adversaries sometimes are not plotting anything else, but just wait for our mistakes and for our weaknesses to show. So enhancing the governance and enhancing the capacity is very important. And together, we cannot just have a military strong, and it will not be actually a military strong state without strong governance, public support, legitimacy. So all these are important components. And to be frank, with or without NATO membership, this has to be done in all countries. And domestic politics, the extent of domestic politics of other actors, particularly out of region actors, when they're handling the issues in this region, is a problem. They have to strategize because, to be frank, if we're talking about Russia, I don't think Russia has a domestic policy concern when they're applying any strategy or tactics in this region. So this is an asymmetry. And I would suggest that this is something NATO allies should be considering. So yeah, that will be my remarks. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Now, Vasil Bodnar, could you please tell us, we see like all opening remarks of our distinguished guests expressing positions from Europe, from United States, from Turkey. And do you see any roadmap, at least for Ukraine, what to do now? President Biden called President Zelensky. They will have some meeting after meeting with Putin. What is a roadmap, what to do, what to demand, or only develop your country and wait until this moment comes? What is your vision of the situation to ensure security of Ukraine?
The basic thing is within our constitution, it's the NATO membership. So we will never give up the idea of getting membership either with map, without map. That is the key and strategic dimension of our policy. We understand reality, but we understand reality not only within the NATO, but within our surrounding as well. And when personally I'm asking foreign colleagues, what you will do in the days after, when the Russians start the invasion? Big concerns or supply of weapons? We're not asking for Marines or Rangers to be deployed on Ukrainian territory. But we have a clear answer. When we fail, you will fail next. That will be the answer. So now, granting Ukraine this NATO shield, it's not the thing we would like just to hidden ourselves or to strengthen ourselves. it's the way to prevent further expansion of the aggression. I don't believe in the idea that to speak to Putin will bring to resolution of the conflict, because they adopted a strategy, and this strategy is based on the necessity to raise stakes. And in case we are also having dialogue with them, yes, within the trilateral contact group, together with Germans and French, within the normative format. But if you will hear what they're talking about, it's a ridiculous things. So it's all the propaganda and blaming things. It's not the discussions about settlement. That's the problem. So the strategy of Kremlin is to deteriorate the situation and try to get the benefit of that. And the best response is solidarity in meeting the security challenges and combining efforts how to prevent it. Okay, dear Prime Minister, I also agree that we shouldn't scare every time, and we wouldn't cry wolves, wolves, but there is not wolves, yes? But from the other point of view, when the tanks are already on the borderline and they're in combat readiness, no words will help more than javelins and anti-tank rifles, or whatever we'll call them. So the basic strategy is to insist on NATO membership whenever it will happen. The strengthening of internal defense and resilience by itself, because it is also one of the things the society need to feel from inside, and there is still a strong will to keep this country out of Russia. And even the day before yesterday, we have a presentation of surveys which actually show that Ukrainian population only increase awareness about the Russian aggression, about who is the enemy, etc., etc. So it is not the way Russia expected, that the war will be forgotten and we will turn back to the business as usual. And Russia is playing the same game, so they are increasing stakes and trying also to make themselves see that they are encircled with the enemies. That is also the strategy which previously was adopted by the Tsars or whatever who will be the rulers. So nothing new. And we now, what is the response? Like it was during the Crimea War in 19th century, or when it was during the contradiction between Soviet and Western blocs. So the dialogue on the necessary levels, but restrained and trying to stop them whenever it's possible. Because if you fail to stop, they will get all the territories, profits, etc., and mines. The biggest thing is the mines in informational sphere. So maybe that's in general terms, but there is not a clear answer, and then the only answer could be, because the situation is changing, and we will see what's going on after the Biden's Putin meeting. Maybe there will be some miracle decisions. Who knows?
Yeah. So now about miracle decisions, I would ask Ambassador Herbst. Do you expect some miracle decisions first? And actually, how would you evaluate the whole idea of this Biden-Putin summit? Is it something needed, or it is something that will show that Putin is the boss again?
Look, I have no problems with Biden sitting down with Putin. The important thing is what Biden says and what Biden does before, during, and after the summit. I mentioned that Biden's instincts on Russia were sound. He demonstrated that with his firm and quick response to Moscow's buildup on Ukraine's borders earlier this year. But I think he made a number of mistakes since then, since inviting Putin to meet. I already mentioned the first one, the largest, which was Nord Stream 2. But also, you've had, and this is really quite remarkable, a series of cyber attacks on the United States originating in Russia since Biden invited Putin to Geneva. And the Biden administration was very, very slow, and even to this day, not really clear on calling out Russia for this provocation. On the very first one, the Colonial Pipeline, they said, well, what they're not sure was the Russian government. Well, you can be sure, at a minimum, that the Russian government was aware of that and was not putting any obstacles in the way of this attack on the United States by Russian cyber criminals. So unfortunately, since that show of strength supporting Ukraine back in April, he's demonstrated a certain amount of weakness. And that, of course, is not good to prepare the way for a meeting of the two presidents, the first meeting of the two presidents. Now, he's tried to recoup since then. He wrote an excellent piece in the Washington Post last weekend, laying out his basic approach. Of course, the meetings, setting up the Putin summit after he meets with the G7 and with NATO, and also after he meets with EU leaders, was smart, a way to demonstrate that allied unity. And I expect in Geneva, Biden will not embarrass himself or embarrass the United States. He will lay out our deep concern about Moscow's aggression in Ukraine, for that matter, its ongoing aggression in Georgia, its cyber attacks, and other provocations. Therefore, I don't think Putin will be too pleased to hear that. It's conceivable they may reach a tentative agreement on restarting nuclear arms talks, but I'm not certain about that. I think Biden, because of that weakness he demonstrated, will have to show a little bit more strength before Putin is ready to begin to talk seriously on major issues.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ambassador. Prime Minister, Mr. Kubilius, could you please also say more specifically, I know that you're preparing a big document on behalf of the European Union, your commission in European Union towards Russia, maybe some specific elements that we will see in the upcoming future or that could be useful in upcoming future if there is no unity in NATO to invite Georgia, Ukraine tomorrow, what I think would be the best idea. Maybe there are some other options that can be on the table at the moment. Please.
Well, thanks a lot. First of all, our major message is very simple. We do not expect anything positive from President Putin. And I don't know if we can expect anything from, or if President Biden is expecting anything positive from his meeting with Putin. I see the only positive side of that meeting to send to President Putin very clear messages. Hands off, Ukraine, hands off Belarus, hands off Navalny and Democrats in Russia, and if you will not do that, you will pay the price, sanctions and so on and so on. But to expect that suddenly Putin will change and will become himself, and will become something like, I don't know, Gorbachev, of Russia, I would say that would be very naive. So in our document, what we are trying to put, the whole language is based on now it's very popular in Brussels to use this, Joseph Borrell triad, push back, contain, and engage. But when we're talking about engage, we're saying that on engage, we need to have two tracks. One is a little bit with Kremlin on some issues which are still maybe important, but also we're much more engaged with democratic Russian society. On pushback, it's very clear. It's really, military means which are very much needed. And if NATO membership is not possible, then we are taking some ideas from recent report or study made by European Council on Foreign Relations by Nicu Popescu and Gressel on security compacts. We are trying to at least to start real discussion about that. Some kind of security compacts with Ukraine, with Georgia, with Moldova, which you can offer, can be of at least for time being some also assistance. And on contain, of course, Russian hybrid influences, not only cyber or propaganda or whatever what we have in mind, but also very much on dirty money influences, which there is very good report by Atlantic Council, by our friends Anders Aslund and Julia. Oh, I forgot her. Ambassador knows very well. It's very good report, very strong report about really what is the problem. Trillions of US dollars are flowing around of Russian dirty money, and that is of course creating a lot of influences. And the last point, which I would say, since there is Turkish ambassador. I am not, again, I am not a, a Turkish expert and not a military expert, but I wrote even a piece not so much time ago, after several, several events which I saw, both in Libya, in Syria, and even in so-called Karabakh war, with very simple conclusions that Turkey is showing that, if you are showing military force, Russians are, how to say, not trying to fight, against. So that is, maybe I'm making a wrong conclusion, but what we saw in Syria, near Idlib, what we saw in Libya with all your, new type of, war technologies and so on, and in some way, even in Karabakh war, it shows that really, if you are, able to show your military force, then Russians have nothing to answer. And I understand why Ukrainians now are looking for, some kind of agreements or alliance with Turkey on military technologies. So that's at least how I understand. Maybe I'm wrong. I am again. I am not saying that I am a big military expert, but I see, what I can just very positively, evaluate.
Thanks a lot. And I would also evaluate this positively. That's why my first question was about balancing. Ambassador, could you please also tell us, if possible, as you told us about balancing, what kind of influence relations between Turkey and its NATO partners has, or there is no influence on relations between Turkey and Georgia, or Turkey and Ukraine, or maybe better relations are required? What is your view on this?
Well, thank you. Again, as an ambassador and active duty, there are things I would say, but of course, Turkey backs peaceful resolution of the conflicts, like the EU always suggests, and of course, a military involvement is the last resort that everybody would like to see. And in Syria, definitely, if my country's sacrifices were still not going on, we would be facing a lot of challenges still, and definitely also in Libya, that is also true. But then, to be frank, Russia is not the only country who is, for instance, backing General Haftar, and so it's a very complicated story. And let me stop it here. On terms of balancing or not. Again, it's not about balancing. We're part of an alliance. NATO is an alliance, and it's a defense alliance. And when I was reading last year, a couple of years ago, particularly started whether Turkey is a trusted ally or not, this sort of speculations in whole social media, sometimes even delivered from NATO-backed think tanks. And I was wondering, who are they to challenge the membership of my country in NATO? And these are, as Vasil was saying, there are sometimes certain rhetorics that are produced in this hybrid tactics by our adversaries, which are then co-owned, and then started disseminated by our allies. And that has been a tactic, a long-term tactic with the Soviet Union, to be frank. And we can see that it continues sometimes still. There are certain allies or part of the political parties of allies who maybe even that they don't even realize that they serve to the interest of the adversary. So that's an issue. But I was also saying that I was thinking when I was listening to Ambassador Herbst, and I was thinking if there are certain things that are happening, and if you're not, if you don't realize that a person in your country is involved in a certain coup attempt, for instance, in another country, you're either an accomplice or you're insufficient. And that happened to us. And so we still have challenges, yes, or we have challenges in Syria with the PKK-YPG issue, definitely. But these issues are, we have always tried to keep them and solve them within the alliance and not make them an issue of that will impede our cooperation in the real strategic macro picture. That includes the Black Sea, that includes Ukraine, that includes Georgia. So I would like to underline that I do believe, and this is my notwithstanding my duty here, but as my very personal point of view, who believe in the Euro-Atlantic cooperation, the importance of it, is that the NATO member states, politicians, diplomats have to be very aware of the attempts to divide NATO, to distract NATO from the real picture. Now, Prime Minister had mentioned about military expertise or Turkish expertise. It's not an issue, but this European, for instance, Security Council, I'm not also an EU expert, and I've never worked in even like an EU related matter. So I have no whatsoever, except for reading the European Parliament reports where I need to read. Almost all countries who might support the Security Compact for the Eastern Partnership countries are NATO members. So what would be the difference that they would bring in the EU context that they can't do in NATO? Why do we have to create different platforms to increase support? If I had misunderstood, I would apologize, but I thought we're talking about an EU initiative for security. So we do have NATO, and these two countries who would like to be part of NATO, and the same capitals in the EU, and there are same capitals in the NATO. So maybe it's not about NATO. And I would definitely say that if we're going to speak frank with our partners, strategic partners, both countries are strategic partners to us, we basically are ready to share with them the defense industry, which we are developing, but of course with the help of our allies. So when our allies, for instance, inhibit our defense technology development, it will have an impact. And I know a couple of decisions during the Azeri-Armeni war, which was targeting our defense industry. So these are the moves that maybe the other countries who are not in NATO are watching happily. So we have to be smart. We have to, as we are expecting our strategic partners to have good governance, we also have to have good governance in NATO and among us. So that would be my provoking remarks. And in terms of balancing, NATO, again, if there's going to be any balancing, it cannot be one member of NATO, and it cannot be a burden of one member of NATO. It has to be with an alliance. Thank you.
Yeah, I know. Thanks a lot, Ambassador. I know that some of our speakers are already very in a hurry and our hour is finished, but I would like to say that this closing remarks by Ambassador was very good in terms of the whole NATO alliance, which will meet next week, and then Biden, Putin will meet, and etc. I'm in Georgia, so I have some very little right to advocate for Georgia. The whole NATO alliance should understand that inviting Ukraine, inviting Georgia will not lead to any war with Russia, will not lead to any, I don't know, increasing of dangerous situation with Russia. In opposite, it will lead to secure, safe borders with Georgia, for Turkey, for example, with Ukraine, and etc. More safe environment between Russia and European and NATO countries. So maybe it is a time to think about that and stop thinking about money from Nord Stream 2. Thanks a lot. Thank you all for your time. Thank you for joining, and let's see what will happen next week. Thank you.